here we go. So I'm going to start with an unboxing of the Herbcrafter's Tarot. Artwork here is by Joanna Powell Colbert, and it's written by Letitia Guthrie. I love this box for starters, like really nice box with some, this like beautiful, like hyper realistic artwork and just nice sturdy cardboardiness. Then we have a nice little booklet. I like this. It kind of walks the line. A lot of newer tarot decks have been coming out in kind of big box with a big like full size, like shelf size book. And this kind of like walks the line. It's not a tiny like little white book as we call them. It is, you know, kind of like still a nice book that you can hold in your hand, but a little smaller if it's inside the like a slightly smaller box. I think it's kind of nice. It's black and white. I think it does have occasional illustrations. Yeah, like here we have like the aces. On this deck we have like this nice little kind of wreathing of you know, like leafies and berries over here, which I think is really nice. And the aces, by the way they've kind of organized this is like aces, twos, threes, etc. Instead of going from ace through the end in one suit, they've arranged it by numbers. And it's really neat because it's the Herbcrafter's Tarot, and they've decided to associate certain numbers of the deck with certain types of plants. So the aces are all weeds. And if you know me, actually, I don't know if this is something I like wear on my sleeve. I'm a big weed nerd. I went on a weed walk like 10 years ago at a music festival I was playing, and it kind of changed my life and changed the way I looked at the world. And it was like, you know, really about all of these plants that are just kind of growing near us that we might see growing out of the crack of a sidewalk that actually have these uses in our lives. And the person who led the walk really talked about how sometimes the plant you need will show up around you without you even realizing it. She told a little story about how she moved into a new house and she had all this nettle growing, and she realized later that nettle was like the exact plant, had the exact kind of energetic property she needed in her life right then. So I always think that's really interesting. And now that I have a house, I like really pay attention to the weeds that come up every year and kind of treat them as like friends. And it's an exciting thing as my, you know, garden, such as it is, my yarden, as it starts to grow, to see like, oh, now the spiderwort's coming up, now the black-eyed Susans are coming up, and just learn about all of these different plants as they're coming up, and, you know, kind of what their origins are. Some of them are native plants, some of them are invasive, some of them have traditional uses. It's really fascinating to me. So anyway, I'm a big fan of weeds. I love, especially like I loved learning on that weed walk about like plantain, which is those kind of like big green kind of leafy shaped leaves, you know, like classic leaf shape that you'll see like literally growing out of a crack in the sidewalk. And it turns out plantain is a really strong drawing plant. And we think of it as a weed, and it is a weed because it can grow in the most, you know, horrendous conditions and just thrive. And it also is this, has these strong drawing properties. So it's actually a plant that's really good for like a mosquito bite or a sting. And if you literally make a poultice of it, it will actually draw, you know, those, you know, poisons out of your skin. Obviously, of course, still go to doctors and stuff like that. This is not me poo-pooing Western medicine. This is me celebrating the fact that we also have plants literally growing out of cracks of sidewalks that we've always ignored that can be beneficial to us. I think that's really nifty. So I'm pro weeds, and I love weeds as being connected with aces. And the keywords here are weeds, starting point, and possibility. So I really like that. Anyhow, let me get to the cards. So this is like hyper realistic artwork that I believe is done in colored pencil. Let's see, I think it might be described somewhere here how she does her art, but I'll just like let you see the Fool, which is dandelion. Like, are you sure that's not a photo? That's friggin' like she drew that. As someone who draws a little tiny bit, I'm amazed by the level of detail. Like hyper-realism always makes me go like, oh my god. I'm such a fan. I'm so obsessed. And I love that she has created this really beautiful mandala of dandelions as like the first card in the deck, giving us that sense of possibility. Let me take a look and see if I can find out what her medium is that she draws with, because that'd be nifty to know. About this deck. Some really interesting stuff I do want to share with you in here. All right, I'm not sure. Anyway, it looks to me like its hype is definitely drawn, and it looks to me like it is like, you know, colored pencils type of situation. And look at the backs of the cards. Look at this wonderful kind of organized mess, you know, of pollinators and roots and leaves and seeds. I just love it. I think it's really nice. So absolutely crazy about this kind of aesthetic on the back of the cards. My cousin has a housekeeping aesthetic that she refers to as clutter bitch, and is actually the coolest housekeeping aesthetic ever, because it doesn't, she's actually not, it's not like messy. It's just that she has so many things that she loves that are beautiful, and she'll just have like 27 plants on a windowsill, you know, and each one will have something special about it, like a little bauble in it, or a little jewel, or like be growing out of like an old chipped mermaid or something like that. And it's just special. It just makes you feel like you're walking through, I don't know, like an old world market or something like that. And you're seeing all of these different things just assembled hodgepodge together. It just creates its own artistry. And that's the same feeling that I get from the back of this deck. So let me talk to you about some of these. I'm going to just leaf through some of these. What I really like is that some of these are plants I'm really familiar with, and some of them are plants I'm absolutely not familiar with. So they've chosen here for the Chariot. This is really nice because we're in the middle of winter as I record this, is cedar. American cedar, American red cedar. I do have a few of those trees growing on my property, and sometimes are mislabeled juniper here in the States. There's a lot of that I have learned in both like animal and plant taxonomy, where things are just named for plants and animals they kind of look like from Europe by, I guess, you know, colonists. And I don't like feel wonderful about that. I think it's really nice for us to, when possible, try to identify the, you know, kind of original names for these plants, rather than go with the names given by, you know, European colonists who were like, this looks like that thing I have back home, I'll call it this. Anyway, but this is cedar, and I think it's really nice. I just love this, again, like circular mandala vibe for the Chariot. Like this real sense of power and yet stability that the Chariot embodies. And you can look at cedar and smell, you know, you can smell it in your mind without even having to have it nearby. And it just, I really like the vibe. And it really speaks to the winter for me, because winter is like that. You have this sense of possibility. We have a new year, right? And at the same time, everything is kind of slowing down, and the things that are still there are the evergreens, are the trees that are just always there no matter what. So you have that sense of both movement and like steadfast stability that the Chariot really represents. Then we have my old friend Garlic here as strength. I love garlic as strength because so many people use garlic as a remedy, right? As like a, oh, you're sick, you know, you have strep throat, you have a sore throat, time to eat some raw garlic with honey. That's like something that my cousin does all the time. And there's actually like some honeycomb in here. So, you know, we have that. We also have this braided garlic, which is both really a beautiful aesthetic that I've always loved, but also like has been used traditionally in folk magic, right? You braid garlic. I think the thing people think now is like keeping away vampires or whatever. But garlic has like a long history of being a plant used as protection. And also I'm Italian. I know I don't look it, and I know my name doesn't sound like it, but I'm Italian, and so garlic is just my boyfriend. So, and that's strength. I think that's a really nice card for strength. I'm not gonna show you every card in the deck because I don't want this to be an endless video, but I'm gonna show you a few. I love the Wheel of Fortune, which is again like this beautiful mandala, and it's the way they've chosen to associate it is with a kitchen garden. So you can see a couple of different plants in here that you would just use in cooking. Looking at it right now, I can identify like a little bit of mint. I see some chives, these purple flowers. If you've never grown chives, that's actually what chives look like when they flower, and they're beautiful and also very tasty. It's a nice thing to put in a salad. I see violets over here, which is a nice little choice. I see some parsley. So I don't know. I think I see some basil on here. I love it, and I love it as a plant nerd. And the idea of the Wheel of Fortune being represented by the kitchen garden, because the kitchen, again, has that steadfastness to me of like, no matter what life brings, you're going to solve it around your kitchen table. It just makes me think of my great grandmother, like sitting around her kitchen table in her Sunnyside, Queens apartment, and all of the conversations that took place there over years and years and years. You know what I mean? Over her making like some pasta with like a simple marinara sauce, and everyone sitting down and just sharing what was going on with them. And that feels really special to me. And I think about that, like the Wheel of Fortune, like really speaks to that, like time moves on, but here is what is the same. Here's what you can always count on. Let me skip ahead a bit, because like I said, I don't want to waste your time going through every card. I love to see a few cards in every deck before I buy a deck. But I like to be surprised a little bit too. So let's see. Let me pick a couple of nifty ones. Here's the Six of Air, and it's Cattail. Cattail's really neat. Did you know that cattail actually is known for, I'm not going to say this right, like denuclearizing nuclear waste sites. This was like, there have been actual studies done on this, because we have some, you know, like after Hiroshima and Chernobyl and stuff like that, there have actually been like some studies around like what helps to bring the land back after a nuclear friggin', you know, disaster. And cattail has been shown to be one of those restorative plants that literally like help suck the toxicity out of the land and make it okay again. Anyway, I think that's really neat. And what I think is neat about that association, I don't know if it's intentional, is that this is the Six of Air, which is analogous to the Six of Swords, and the Six of Swords really is a card about recovery from disaster. It really is a card about being moved out of danger into safety, and that is literally something that cattail literally does for us, so I think that's really cool. I also love this aesthetic. Like, I love that air is represented by these feather quills and by writing, and you have this sense of, you know, communication and even journaling and kind of writing with intention, having these different implements for writing, kind of in this natural setting. Just aesthetically, I'm just like in love with this deck. I think it's super neat. All right, let's see. Seven of Fire, we have Cinnamon. Again, this is organized not by suits, but by like numbers and, you know, I guess dignities, court royalty, whatever you would call that. Okay, Seven of Fire is Cinnamon. You have this lovely spread here with a little bit of lime and with a mortar and pestle and with a jar full of cinnamon sticks and with an actual roaring fire here. So Seven of Fire is like the Seven of Wands, right? The Seven of Wands, kind of a card of some level of discord, of feeling like you have to protect yourself, you know, feeling like you have to stand up for yourself. And I really like this element of protection that I see here. We see this like rosary with a skull at the bottom of it, and if that signifies more than I, as like a non-religious white person, knows, then I really apologize. Like, there may be more cultural significance than I'm aware of. But we have this kind of protective idea of, you know, skulls are protective, and then we have limes and cinnamon here. And I don't know. It's a really, again, it's a really nice aesthetic. And it also shows the heritage, like the artist draws from this ancestral tradition that is not really mine to access as a white person. But I love that it's here. You know what I mean? I want to share some of this is a good time, I think, for me to share a little bit about what's in here, what the two creators wrote. Because there's a little bit of an explanation about the court cards, which are written in Spanish. So we have, here, let me explain it to you. Because that's what I'm talking about. This is ancestral tradition. It's not my tradition. It's a Latinx tradition. And I feel really happy both to see it expressed so beautifully and so powerfully in these cards. And I also feel like honored as someone who has bought these cards to be able to like have this window into this tradition. you know, to be able to be appreciative rather than appropriative with this deck. So the titles of the people cards are changed from traditional court card names to represent the archetypes each woman embodies as she matures into her craft, from wanderer to warrior to midwife to teacher. I love those 4 descriptors. Pages become hijas, daughters. Knights become adelitas, warriors. I love that. I never knew the Spanish word for warrior. I just love it. Queens become madres, mothers. And kings, this I love the most, become curanderas, healers. I love that, because you have kings being associated less with this patriarchal phenomenon and more with the idea of like the wise woman, the person you go to who you know is going to help you understand what you're going through and solve your problems, who is going to consult with you, the curandera. I love that. Like fairy godmothers, each court card offers a gift to the Herbcrafter in the form of a virtue. Hijas give playfulness, Adelitas give activism, Madres give love, and curanderas give wisdom. The people cards feature the hands of the Herbcrafter. Our intention is to highlight the plant as well as to celebrate the slow, intentional ritual of handcrafting. I just think this is, I love how this deck has all come together as, you know, the roots of tarot and the roots of herbalism, and as well as this, you know, beautiful spirituality that, like I said, as a white woman, is not really mine to claim, but I love having a window into it. Let me share a few more things with you. We have the 9 of Earth, 9 of Pentacles, as you may know, one of my favorite cards, and it is apple, and it shows this beautiful abundance vibe of really like this work in progress. We see some apple slices drying on a line. We see a basket full of apples, and then we see like an actual coring an apple right now. Like we're in the middle of the work. And then the apple peels over here. And I just love it. It's like this sense of, it gives that sense that the 9 of Pentacles gives of like this kind of self-made abundance, this kind of sense of like my hard work has yielded something beautiful and special and it's worth appreciating. I think it communicates it in a really beautiful way. And that's actually something I was worried about and made me a little hesitant to buy this deck. There's a couple of decks that have like, you know, a kind of herb-centric aesthetic, and what I didn't want to do was get a deck that was more like an oracle deck of different herbs instead of being like a true tarot deck. I really like how I feel that I get the vibe of each tarot card in this deck, even though the symbolism is not traditional symbolism. I think that they still manage to express kind of the messages of these different cards. So let me show you, I'm going to show you just a couple more. This is the Adelita of Air, the Warrior of Air, or analogous with the Knight of Swords. And Oregano is the card here. Oregano is a very abundant and very hardy herb. It'll grow pretty much anywhere. You can forget to water it. You can overwater it. Like, it's fine. And definitely has some health properties. Oregano, some of its major constituents are oreganol, appropriately, and thymol, and both of those are really good for ear, nose, and throat health. I actually will take thyme and stick it, like just plain old thyme, a sprig of thyme, and stick it in hot water when I've got like a cold coming on or something like that, because those constituents can then get exactly where they need to go, to the back of your throat, to help you like fight off respiratory illness. And again, I will remind you, especially in this like times of pandemic, which is the case when I'm recording this, please look at these, you know, like look at things like herbalism and plant allies as like these wonderful things, these wonderful gifts, but not as replacements for like science and Western medicine. These things can be used hand in hand. I think we should use all the resources at our disposal. Anyway, this is the Adelita of Air, and what I like about that kind of thing is like, I look at oregano as being so hardy and also so powerful. So already I get these, you know, night vibes, and it's an aromatic, so it kind of makes sense that we're aligning it with air here. The Knight of Swords is a communicator. I really just, I just love it. I feel really positive about this. Then we have the Adelita of Fire, and it's Cayenne. Like, what a perfect Knight of Fire, right? And we have like this wonderful mortar and pestle thing, like smashing up dried cayenne peppers here and some things that might go with it. We have an onion and garlic and some rosemary in the background here. So obviously something very delicious is about to happen. I love that. And traditionally, of course, like hot and spicy foods are associated with like passion, much like wands. Now we have the Madre of Fire, thyme. So I mentioned when I was talking about oregano that I often use a sprig of thyme, which I know is not the same herb, as like a tea when I've got a cold coming on. And that's because thyme has the same constituents. It has both oregano and thymol in it, and a little bit of menthol, I believe, which you can kind of taste. It has that hot, cool feeling, which is very soothing when you've got like a sore throat. Anyway, this is thyme as the Madre of Fire. And you can see a potions and a brews book here, and you see just a bunch of thyme. Thyme is so abundant. It's kind of like it's a mountain herb, and it kind of grows like a bush. It just kind of looks like a awkward little shrub, small, low to the ground, and it's getting mashed up. And I'm a big fan of thyme, which is why I was like, ooh, let me show you the thyme one. But I love too, like we get to see the Herbcrafter's hands here, just like engaging with the herb and getting its benefits in a very hands-on kind of way. Which, by the way, when we engage with things like, medicine and over-the-counter medicines and stuff like that, there's this sense that there's this impenetrable divide between Western science and kind of everything else, right? The use of herbalism, the use of more traditional and homeopathic remedies, the use of essential oils. And the truth is that many of the reasons herbs and essential oils work is because they have these constituents that are actually constituents that have then been isolated and used again in Western medicine. And like an example of this is aspirin, which literally comes from willow bark. So aspirin is known to be a fever reducer and a pain reducer, and there is evidence that Neanderthals used to actually chew willow bark to relieve a toothache. And by chewing willow bark, they're essentially doing what we would do today by taking an aspirin. So if you're willing to dig deep and not play into this false duality of science versus holistic health, and see that all of this is understandable, and to me, what I love about the scientific method is hypothesizing and exploring and learning what possibilities there are. And I don't think there's any need for us to kind of draw this line in the sand between what is and isn't valid, because there's a reason that these traditions work. And it's actually, if you care to look into it, which many people who are devout, not woo-woo people don't care to look into it. They tend to assume it's all hogwash. But if you care to look into it, there's a reason, willow bark became aspirin. Thymol and oregano are constituents that literally help our ear, nose, and throat. And clove oil, for example, is isolated and used in dental applications all the time, literally. And that is just a friggin' clove. And it originated as people taking a clove and kind of chewing on it when they had a toothache because it helped. And then there's now scientific reasons that we understand why it helps. And it has to do with the constituents. Anyway, I don't mean to geek out about this. I feel strongly that there is this false divide between being on the side of either science or holistic health. And I'm here to say that you can do both things. You don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. You can embrace science and all it has to offer. And you can understand that though that these practices may have been arrived at in a slightly different way, that they also have scientific backing. And indeed, I tend to think there's a real patriarchal point of view where we look at things like herbalism and these traditions that may have been passed down on a matriarchal line, woman to woman, that to some extent really probably did utilize the scientific method, right? The scientific method being let's see what works. After a bunch of trial and error, we have learned that this helps with this. That's literally it. The scientific method is basically fuck around and find out. And so it's interesting to me that there are people who are so dismissive of these kind of more holistic or kind of non-Western healing traditions that in fact were probably very cutting edge for their time and still have yielded very like have yielded useful practices that could benefit everyone if Western science type people cared to look into it further. And certainly we've seen some of this, like there have been some studies done around, you know, traditional herbal remedies that have actually found the science behind them. And I think that's great. Anyway, we have, the last one I'm going to show you is the curandera of water, which is seaweed. And I love everything about this card. I love that we are steeping a bath right now. And there is like, literally there's seaweed in the bath. There's different types of seaweed in the bath. There's a beeswax candle over here. There's this deep, deep sense of water as a healer. And us literally creating a healing potion for us to soak in, to soak away whatever we need curing from. And that to me embodies the element of water in a big way. I've always looked at water as a healer. I don't know if this has something to do with my chart. I'm actually an earth sign. But I look at water as healing, and maybe it's the same way that like a plant needs water to grow. I've always looked at water as like this, I get this beautiful feeling of relief and grace when I connect with water as an element. And I really feel that in this card, which kind of embodies the water element. Anyway, so this is a great tarot deck. I'm really excited to be reading with it going into 2022. And if you have been on the fence about whether you want to get it, I hope that this may have given you like enough kind of background to make a good decision for yourself.